The first hints of trouble came as a gentle ripple across the quantum sensor grid. Captain Celine Arcturus frowned at the holographic display that dominated the central command hub of Orion Observation Station. The anomaly had appeared for less than a microsecond, a phantom signal at the very edge of Stellara Empire's border monitoring network. Yet its magnitude was unlike anything the station had recorded in its 15-year operational history. "Ryan, did you catch that?" Celine called to her sensor engineer, who was already hunched over his console, fingers dancing across the adaptive interface. Ryan Vale nodded, his features illuminated by the blue glow of his workstation. "Yes, Captain. Recording shows a mass energy signature consistent with, well, nothing in our database." He looked up, the vertical pupils of his Stellaran eyes narrowing. "If I didn't know better, I'd say it was a glitch." Celine was not convinced. Orion Station represented the farthest reach of the Stellara Empire's defensive perimeter, positioned strategically at the boundary between galaxies. For centuries, the Empire had expanded without meaningful resistance, establishing dominion over 12 star systems and subjugating countless species. Their technological superiority had never been seriously challenged, until now. "Run a diagnostic on the entire sensor array," she ordered, moving closer to examine the phantom reading. "And prepare a report for High Command. Flag it as anomalous, but potentially significant." "Captain," Ryan hesitated, "the Supreme Fleet will consider this a threat assessment. Are you certain? It could simply be a calibration error in the opposing station." Celine understood his concern. The Empire's military doctrine operated on the principle of overwhelming response to even minor provocations. But something about this phantom signal triggered her instincts, honed through years of border patrol and conflict resolution missions. "I'm aware, Ryan, but my orders are clear. Any unexplained phenomena in this sector must be reported immediately." What Celine couldn't know was that the HMS Vanguard, Pride of Earth Alliance's deep space fleet, was at that moment executing the most daring military maneuver in human history, cloaked in revolutionary phase-shift technology that bent light and sensor waves around its massive hull. The Vanguard had penetrated deeper into Stellara territory than any human vessel had ever managed. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Hector Donovan watched his crew with measured pride. The ship represented humanity's greatest technological achievement, a vessel designed not only for exploration, but also as a demonstration of Earth's growing power in the cosmic theater. "Stealth systems functioning at optimal capacity," Captain reported his first officer, Commander Liza Chen. "We've successfully traversed the Omega Belt without detection." "Excellent," Donovan replied, his voice steady despite the gravity of their mission. "Maintain course and speed. Remember, people, we're not here to start a war. We're here to prevent one." For decades, Earth had watched as the Stellara Empire expanded relentlessly through neighboring systems, establishing a pattern of conquest and subjugation. Intelligence reports suggested that the human homeworld might soon be considered a potential target for protective integration into the Empire. The Alliance leadership had decided that diplomatic overtures from a position of perceived weakness would be futile. Instead, they authorized this unprecedented demonstration of human technological capability. Back at Orion Station, Celine's report had triggered precisely the response Ryan had feared. The station's quantum communicator flashed with an incoming priority transmission from the Supreme Fleet. "Captain Arcturus." The holographic form of High Admiral Kalis Marrow materialized in the command center, his decorated uniform and stern expression demanding immediate attention. "Your anomaly report has been received and analyzed. We are dispatching a defensive squadron to your position." Celine straightened her posture. "Admiral, we have no confirmation that this represents an actual threat. It was a momentary reading that hasn't repeated." "Captain," Kalis cut her off. The Empire does not wait for threats to announce themselves. 30 vessels from the 7th Battle Group are already en route to your position. You will coordinate your sensor grid with their tactical systems upon arrival. The transmission ended before Celine could respond, leaving her with a growing sense of unease. 30 battleships represented an extraordinary response for what might be nothing more than a sensor malfunction. "Captain," Ryan called from his station, voice tense with new urgency. "I've been analyzing the phantom reading. If it was a vessel, based on the energy dispersion pattern, it would have to be approximately 3 kilometers in length." Celine felt her blood chill. No known species in the explored sectors possessed ships of that magnitude, except for the Empire itself. "That's impossible. Nothing could approach that size without triggering multiple detection layers." "Unless," Ryan suggested carefully, "they possess stealth technology beyond our current understanding." The implications hung in the air between them. The Stellara Empire's dominance had been built on the assumption of technological superiority. If another civilization had developed advanced cloaking systems that could shield vessels of such magnitude, the strategic balance of power in the galaxy would be fundamentally altered. Aboard the Vanguard, Donovan received troubling news from his sensor officer. "Captain, we're detecting significant energy signatures converging on this sector. Analysis suggests multiple Stellaran warships on intercept trajectories." "Have we been detected?" Donovan asked sharply. "Negative, sir. Our phase shift cloak remains stable. However, they appear to be establishing a search pattern centered approximately 2,000 kilometers from our current position." Donovan exchanged glances with his strategic operations officer, Commander Wei. "They suspect something, but they don't know exactly what or where. Recommendations." Wei studied the tactical display. "We could withdraw, sir. Mission parameters allowed for retreat if discovered. However," she hesitated. "Speak freely, Commander." "This deployment pattern suggests they're operating on suspicion rather than certainty. If we remain in position and they find nothing, it might actually reinforce our advantage. They'll dismiss the initial reading as an anomaly." Donovan considered this. The Vanguard's mission was to demonstrate human technological capability, to prove that Earth could penetrate Stellaran defenses undetected if necessary. A successful withdrawal now would accomplish that goal. But remaining in place, allowing the Empire's forces to search fruitlessly around them, would send an even more powerful message. "We'll hold position," he decided. "Maintain stealth protocols and prepare for emergency phase jump if detection becomes imminent." The hours that followed were tense on both vessels. At Orion Station, Celine watched as the 30 Stellaran warships arrived and deployed into a complex search pattern. The ships were impressive, each nearly a kilometer long, bristling with plasma cannons and graviton projectors capable of tearing apart any conventional vessel. Still nothing on sensors, Ryan reported, after the search had been underway for nearly 6 hours. "But I've been working on refining our detection algorithms based on the initial anomaly." "Show me," Celine ordered. Ryan brought up a new display. Standard sensor sweeps are designed to detect mass, energy emissions, and spatial distortions. But if we recalibrate to focus on quantum fluctuations in subspace, phenomena normally considered background noise, I'm detecting faint but consistent abnormalities in this region. He highlighted an area within the search perimeter. Celine studied the readings. What could cause this pattern? Theoretically, a perfectly executed phase shift cloak. It's a technology our theoretical physicists have speculated about, but considered practically impossible due to the energy requirements. The implication stunned Celine. You're suggesting someone has not only developed this technology, but deployed it on a massive scale. Ryan nodded grimly. The pattern is consistent with a large object displacing quantum space, while remaining invisible to conventional sensors. Celine faced a critical decision. Reporting this theory to Admiral Kalis would likely trigger an immediate offensive response. firing blindly into the area where the anomaly might be located. If they were wrong, it would be a waste of resources. If they were right, it could initiate conflict with an unknown power, possessing technology that rivaled their own. Before she could decide, the situation changed dramatically. On the Vanguard, an emergency alert sounded. "Captain," the sensor officer called out. "They've altered their scanning parameters. New sensor beams are probing directly adjacent to our position using quantum fluctuation detection." Donovan's mind raced. The Stellarans had adapted far more quickly than intelligence had predicted. "Time until probable detection?" "Minutes, sir, maybe less." The mission parameters were clear. Avoid direct confrontation if possible. But retreat under active pursuit would expose their stern shields to potential weapons fire, the weakest point in their defenses. "It appears the time for hiding is over," Donovan said, rising from his command chair. "Tactical. Prepare defensive systems. Communications. Ready the diplomatic package on all frequencies." "Sir?" his first officer questioned. Donovan smiled grimly. "We came to make a statement. Commander, let's make it unmistakable. Deactivate the phase shift cloak on my mark." At Orion Station, Selene was about to contact Admiral Kalis when Ryan shouted in alarm. "Captain, massive energy surge at coordinates 227 Mark 84. The holographic display at the center of the command deck exploded with new information, as where empty space had existed moments before. A colossal vessel materialized. The ship was unlike anything in Stellaran records, sleek and predatory, with angular lines that spoke of both function and intimidation. It dwarfed the surrounding Stellaran vessels, its hull gleaming with a metallic luster that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. "By the 5 moons," Selene whispered. The phantom reading had been real, and worse. The vessel had been hiding directly within the search perimeter, undetected despite being surrounded by the Empire's most advanced warships. The communications array erupted with panicked transmissions from the search fleet. Admiral Kalis's voice cut through the chaos. "All vessels, battle formations, target the intruder and prepare to fire on my command." Selene watched in horror as 30 Stellaran warships oriented their weapons toward the mysterious vessel. The resulting conflict could devastate the sector and potentially trigger an interstellar war with an evidently advanced civilization. "Admiral," she called urgently into the command channel. "Recommend caution. The vessel has not taken hostile action. It revealed itself deliberately." "Your recommendation is noted, Captain," Kalis replied coldly. "But the security of the Empire takes precedence over speculation about intent." On the Vanguard, Donovan watched the Stellaran vessels assume attack positions around his ship. "They're preparing to fire, Captain," his tactical officer reported. "Then let's give them something to think about," Donovan replied. "Weapons. Target the uninhabited moon at coordinates 115 Mark 42. Single plasma lance, full power." The weapons officer hesitated momentarily before acknowledging the order. The Vanguard's main weapon, a spinal-mounted plasma lance designed to channel the energy of the ship's massive fusion reactors, had never been fired at full capacity outside of testing ranges. "Warning shot configured, sir. Target locked." Donovan took a deep breath. "Fire." From the perspective of the Stellaran fleet, what happened next defied comprehension. A blinding beam of concentrated plasma, burning with the intensity of a newborn star, erupted from the forward section of the human vessel. The beam crossed the vast distance to the designated moon in less than a second, and upon impact, the celestial body didn't merely suffer damage, it shattered. Where a moon of nearly 500 kilometers diameter had orbited, now existed only a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated rock and dust, with fragments spinning away in all directions. The demonstration of power was unmistakable. In the stunned silence that followed, the Vanguard broadcast on all frequencies. Donovan's voice, translated by advanced linguistic algorithms into perfect Stellaran, reached every vessel in the sector. "This is Captain Hector Donovan of the Earth Alliance vessel, HMS Vanguard. We have entered your territory not as an act of aggression, but as a demonstration of capability. That was a warning shot at minimal power. We come with a proposal for your leadership, not with hostile intent. However, we are prepared to defend ourselves if necessary." On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Kalis stared at the holographic representation of the destruction with barely contained shock. In his 4 decades of military service, he had never witnessed weapon technology of such devastating efficiency. A strategic assessment flashed through his mind. If the intruder vessel targeted his fleet with similar firepower, they would suffer catastrophic losses before they could inflict significant damage. More disturbing was the revelation that the vessel belonged to humans, a species the Empire had dismissed as technologically primitive and confined to a single star system. Intelligence reports had severely underestimated Earth's capabilities. "Admiral," his tactical officer spoke hesitantly, "our simulations indicate we cannot guarantee victory against this vessel with current forces. Recommend strategic withdrawal and diplomatic engagement." Kalis's pride rebelled against the suggestion, but his duty to the Empire overrode personal feelings. The Supreme Fleet could not afford to lose 30 capital ships in what might be a futile engagement. "All vessels, stand down weapon systems," he ordered finally. "Maintain defensive posture but take no aggressive action." At Orion Station, Celine released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The situation remained precarious, but the immediate threat of combat had receded. "Captain," Ryan reported, "the unknown vessel, the Vanguard, is broadcasting a request for communication specifically with this station." Celine raised an eyebrow. "With us, not the Admiral?" "Yes, Captain. They're requesting to speak with the commanding officer of Orion Station directly." This was unprecedented. In the strict hierarchy of the Empire, diplomatic communications with foreign powers were handled exclusively by designated officials, not border station commanders. Yet something about this unusual request aligned with Celine's instincts about the situation. "Open a channel," she decided. "Route it to my private office." "Captain," Ryan warned, "protocol requires Admiral Kalis's authorization for—" "I'm aware of protocol, Engineer Vale," Celine interrupted firmly. "But these are extraordinary circumstances. I'll accept responsibility for this decision." In her office, the holographic communicator activated to reveal the image of Captain Donovan. Celine was struck by how similar humans appeared to Stellarans. Despite evolving on different worlds in different galaxies, the convergent evolution of intelligent bipedal forms was a phenomenon noted across many species. "Captain Arcturus," Donovan greeted her. "Thank you for accepting this communication." "You seem to know who I am," Celine observed cautiously. Donovan smiled slightly. "We've been monitoring your communications. Your station detected our presence when no one else could. Impressive work. Your demonstration was equally impressive. Captain Donovan, you've certainly gained the Empire's attention. What exactly does Earth want?" "Recognition," Donovan replied simply. "For too long, the Stellara Empire has expanded unchecked, absorbing or subjugating other civilizations. Earth will not be next. We seek formal recognition as a sovereign power and the establishment of diplomatic relations between equals." Celine considered his words carefully. "You must understand that I have no authority to negotiate on behalf of the Empire." "We understand completely, Captain. But you represent something unique within your command structure. Someone willing to consider alternatives to immediate military action. We've studied your career, your handling of the Proxima incident in particular." Celine stiffened. 3 years earlier, she had diffused a potentially devastating conflict with a nomadic species by initiating unauthorized communications, rather than following standard engagement protocols. Her actions had ultimately been vindicated, but not without significant controversy within the imperial hierarchy. What we're proposing, Donovan continued, is that you serve as an intermediary, a neutral communication channel between our representatives and your leadership. It was a dangerous position to occupy. Celine knew, if the negotiations failed, she would likely be held responsible. Yet the alternative, allowing the admiral to dictate the response, could lead to unnecessary conflict. "I will consider your request," she said finally. "But I must consult with my superiors first." Donovan nodded. "Of course. The Vanguard will remain in position for 48 hours, awaiting your response. After that time, we will withdraw to Earth space, and the next time we return, it may not be with just one ship." The communication ended, leaving Celine with the weight of potential history pressing down upon her shoulders. Her next actions could influence the course of interstellar relations for generations to come. Admiral Kalis was predictably furious when informed of the communication. His holographic form paced within the confines of the projection field in Celine's office. "You've exceeded your authority, Captain," he stated coldly. "Direct communication with potential hostiles is strictly prohibited without explicit authorization." "With respect, Admiral," Celine replied, maintaining her composure. The situation required immediate engagement to prevent escalation. The Vanguard demonstrated weapons capability that could have devastated your fleet had hostilities commenced. "That assessment is speculative," Kalis dismissed, though they both knew it wasn't. The moon's destruction had been captured by multiple sensor arrays and analyzed extensively. The energy output had exceeded anything in the Imperial arsenal. "What's not speculative," Celine pressed, "is that they're offering diplomatic engagement rather than conflict. 48 hours to establish communication protocols before they withdraw." Kalis's expression hardened. "And you believe their withdrawal would be permanent? More likely they would return with a larger force once they've analyzed our defensive capabilities." "That's certainly possible," Celine acknowledged. "But consider the alternative. They've already demonstrated they can penetrate our borders undetected. If their intentions were purely hostile, they could have attacked vital systems before revealing themselves." A tense silence filled the room as Kalis considered this logic. Finally, he spoke with clear reluctance. "The Supreme Council is convening an emergency session to address this situation. Your observations will be included in my report." He fixed her with a penetrating stare. "But make no mistake, Captain, no further unauthorized communications with the Earth vessel. That is a direct order." After the Admiral's hologram dissipated, Celine sat at her desk, processing the enormity of what was unfolding. The Empire had never faced a technological peer in its modern history. Its strategic doctrine was built around overwhelming force and technological superiority, concepts suddenly called into question by the Vanguard's capabilities. An alert from her personal communicator interrupted her thoughts. It was a message from Ryan, marked with encryption that indicated highest confidentiality. "Unusual energy readings from Sector 9B. Request your presence in the auxiliary sensor lab immediately." Sector 9B was nowhere near the standoff with the Vanguard. Intrigued and concerned, Celine made her way through the station's curved corridors to the small laboratory where Ryan conducted his more experimental sensor work. When she arrived, the engineer was hunched over specialized equipment that Celine recognized as quantum entanglement detectors, devices designed to monitor the subtle communications that could occur instantaneously across vast distances. "What am I looking at, Ryan?" she asked. He gestured to the display. "This is a quantum frequency typically used only by Imperial intelligence for secure communications. It's supposed to be undetectable without specialized equipment like this." He highlighted a series of pulses on the screen. These transmissions began shortly after the Vanguard revealed itself. Celine studied the pattern. "Origin. That's what's concerning. They're coming from within the Admiral's flagship." "Destination?" Ryan swallowed visibly. a location deep within the forbidden sectors. The implications sent a chill through Celine's body. The forbidden sectors were regions of space officially designated as hazardous due to unusual stellar phenomena. But rumors had circulated for years among the officer corps that the areas actually contained classified Imperial facilities, weapons research stations, or perhaps something else entirely. "You're suggesting the Admiral is communicating with a secret facility?" Celine asked carefully. "I'm not suggesting anything, Captain," Ryan replied pointedly. "I'm simply reporting unusual quantum communications on restricted channels. What those might indicate is beyond my authority to speculate." The careful phrasing was Ryan's way of protecting himself, and her, from accusations of disloyalty. By not explicitly stating conclusions, he maintained plausible deniability while still conveying critical information. "Continue monitoring," Celine ordered. "Record everything but discuss this with no one." "Understood, Captain." As she left the lab, Celine's mind raced with possibilities. Why would Admiral Kalis be communicating with a secret facility at this particular moment? The most concerning explanation was that he was requesting specialized weapons or resources not known to the regular fleet. Preparations for an attack, the diplomatic overtures were designed to mask. On the Vanguard, Captain Donovan was facing his own internal challenges. His first officer, Commander Chen, had voiced concerns about the mission's evolving parameters. "Captain, our orders were to demonstrate capability and then withdraw," she reminded him in the privacy of his ready room. "Initiating diplomatic contact, especially through an unauthorized channel, exceeds mission boundaries." Donovan understood her perspective. The Vanguard carried Earth's most advanced technology too valuable to risk in prolonged exposure to potential enemies. Every hour they remained in stellar space increased the chances of detailed scans penetrating their defensive systems. "I understand your concerns, Commander," he replied. "But consider what we've learned already. The Empire's response pattern was precisely as predicted. Immediate military mobilization without attempt at communication. Except for Captain Arcturus. One officer's deviation from expected protocols doesn't justify extending our mission parameters," Chen countered. "Intelligence disagrees," Donovan said, activating a secure display panel. "This is a psychological profile of Captain Arcturus, compiled from intercepted communications and service records. She represents a growing faction within the Imperial Officer Corps, younger commanders who question the Empire's traditional expansionist policies." Chen studied the display skeptically. "Even if that's true, she's just one captain at a border station. A captain who successfully defied Imperial doctrine during the Proxima incident and was later vindicated," Donovan pointed out. "A captain who has the respect of her peers and subordinates. In hierarchical systems like the Empire, change often begins with individuals in positions similar to hers." Before Chen could respond, the tactical alert sounded. Both officers immediately returned to the bridge, where the sensor officer reported with urgency. "Captain, we're detecting unusual activity from the Imperial flagship. Power signatures suggest weapons charging, but they're not targeting us directly." "Clarify," Donovan ordered. "They appear to be configuring for an area effect discharge," the officer explained. "A pattern that would encompass both our position and—" He hesitated. "Orion Station." Donovan's eyes narrowed. "They're planning to attack their own station? Verification?" "Energy buildup is consistent with their Nova-class disruptors. Weapons designed to disable electronic systems across a wide area." The strategy became immediately clear to Donovan. The Imperial flagship was preparing to temporarily disable Orion Station's communications and sensors, creating a window during which they could attack the Vanguard without interference, and potentially without witnesses who might question the official narrative afterward. "Battle stations," Donovan ordered. "Shields to maximum. Prepare countermeasures against Nova-class disruptors." "Captain," Chen interjected. If we're right about their intentions, we should warn Captain Arcturus. Donovan nodded grimly. Agreed. Open a secure channel to her personal communicator. Use the encryption pattern we observed in her communications with Engineer Vale. At Orion Station, Celine was reviewing the mysterious quantum transmissions when her personal communicator activated with an unfamiliar signal pattern. Cautiously, she accepted the communication. Captain Arcturus, Donovan's voice came through clearly. We've detected weapons activation on the Imperial flagship configured for area effect discharge. We believe they're preparing to temporarily disable your station systems as a prelude to attacking the Vanguard. Celine's mind processed this information rapidly. Such an action would be unprecedented, deliberately disabling an Imperial facility to eliminate witnesses to a potential treaty violation. Yet it aligned disturbingly well with the secret communications Ryan had detected. "Can you transmit your sensor readings?" she requested. "Sending now," Donovan confirmed. The data appeared on her display, confirming what the Vanguard had reported. The energy signature was unmistakable, Nova-class disruptors charging for wide dispersal. A terrible clarity settled over Celine. The empire she had served loyally was preparing to sacrifice her station, her people, to maintain the fiction of superiority. The realization crystallized something that had been forming in her mind since the Vanguard's appearance. The Imperial system was fundamentally broken, prioritizing power and control over the welfare of those it claimed to protect. "Captain Donovan," she said with new resolve, "I need to protect my station. What do you propose?" "We can extend our shields to encompass Orion Station," Donovan offered. "Our defensive technology can withstand the disruptor effect. But you should be aware, taking protection from us will be viewed as collaboration by your superiors." Celine laughed without humor. "I believe that ship has already sailed, Captain. Proceed with your shield extension. I'll handle the consequences." She immediately opened the station-wide communication system. "Attention all personnel. This is Captain Arcturus. We have detected weapons activation from Admiral Kalus's flagship targeted in our direction. This is not a drill. Initiate emergency power systems, isolation protocol, and prepare for potential systems disruption." The protocol had been designed for natural phenomena, like ion storms, not deliberate attack from Imperial vessels. But the protective measures would be the same: isolating critical life support and structural integrity systems from the main power grid to prevent cascade failures. On the Admiral's flagship, the detection of these preparations triggered immediate alarm. Kalus received the report with cold fury. "Captain Arcturus is exceeding her authority again," he stated to his command staff, "and now appears to be actively collaborating with the intruder." His weapons officer shifted uncomfortably. "Admiral, the disruptor targeting encompasses an Imperial facility. The collateral damage is acceptable given the circumstances," Kalus interrupted. "The station's critical systems will survive. What we cannot allow is the continued presence of this human vessel and the dangerous ideas it represents." He turned to his communications officer. "Send final warning to the Earth vessel. They have 5 minutes to power down weapons and prepare for boarding. Or we will consider them hostile and respond accordingly." The officer hesitated momentarily before complying. The message was transmitted to the Vanguard, where Donovan received it with grim resignation. "It appears diplomacy has failed," he observed to his bridge crew. "Tactical status of shield extension to Orion Station?" "Complete, Captain. Their facility is now within our defensive perimeter." Donovan nodded. "Very well. Send our response to the Admiral." The message was brief, but unmistakable in its intent. "The Earth Alliance vessel Vanguard respectfully declines your invitation to surrender. We remain open to diplomatic resolution, but will defend ourselves if attacked. Be advised that our defensive measures now protect Orion Station from any area effect weapons." As the message was transmitted, a new alert sounded on the tactical console. "Captain, we're detecting energy signatures consistent with quantum torpedoes being armed across the Imperial fleet. Quantum torpedoes represented the Empire's most destructive conventional weapons, devices capable of temporarily destabilizing the quantum structure of matter within their blast radius. A direct hit could potentially overwhelm even the Vanguard's advanced shields. "It appears the Admiral has made his decision," Donovan said solemnly. "All hands, prepare for combat operations." But before either side could initiate hostilities, something unexpected occurred. A brilliant flash of light erupted at the edge of the sensor range, followed by the distinctive energy signature of a transdimensional portal opening. Through this swirling vortex of distorted spacetime emerged a vessel that dwarfed even the Vanguard, a massive ship of clearly alien design. Its hull, adorned with symbols and structures unlike anything in either human or Stellaran records. All combat preparations momentarily halted as both fleets assessed this new development. The mysterious vessel transmitted on all frequencies, its message translated into both human and Stellaran languages simultaneously. "This is Ambassador Zara Mbeki of the Earth Alliance, aboard the diplomatic vessel Concordia. We come in peace to observe and facilitate negotiations between humanity and the Stellara Empire." The appearance of a second Earth vessel, one significantly larger than the already imposing Vanguard, sent shockwaves through the Imperial command structure. Admiral Kalis's tactical officer delivered the grim assessment immediately. "Admiral, preliminary scans of the new vessel indicate technology similar to the Vanguard, but on a larger scale. Energy readings suggest defensive and offensive capabilities beyond our current engagement parameters." In other words, the situation had escalated from concerning to potentially catastrophic. What had appeared to be a single intruder was now revealed as merely the vanguard of a much more substantial human presence. The strategic calculus shifted dramatically in an instant. On Orion Station, Celine observed these developments with a mixture of surprise and calculated interest. The appearance of the Concordia suggested a level of coordination and planning on humanity's part that exceeded even her revised estimations of their capabilities. Her communications officer reported with obvious confusion. "Captain, we're receiving a direct transmission from the Imperial capital. The Supreme Council is requesting immediate communication with you specifically." This was unprecedented. The Supreme Council, the highest governing body of the Empire, typically communicated through the established chain of command, not directly to station captains. "Route it to my office," Celine directed, making her way quickly to the secure communication suite. When the transmission activated, she found herself facing not just one council member, but the entire ruling body. 12 figures seated in a semicircle, their features illuminated by the soft blue lighting of the council chamber on the Imperial homeworld. "Captain Arcturus," began the central speaker, an elderly Stellaran whose ceremonial robes indicated his position as first among equals in the council. "We are informed that you have established direct communication with the human vessels." Celine maintained her composure despite her surprise. "That is correct. Speaker, I initiated contact with the Vanguard to prevent immediate conflict." "A wise decision, it seems," the speaker remarked, with a pointed glance toward where Admiral Kalis would normally be represented in such gatherings. His absence was conspicuous. "The Council has reviewed the sensor data from Orion Station, including the communication patterns detected by your engineer Vale." Celine concealed her shock. Ryan's discovery of the quantum transmissions had been reported to no one except her. For the Council to know of it suggested information channels she hadn't anticipated. "The Admiral's independent initiatives were not sanctioned by this Council." The speaker continued carefully. "We have relieved him of command pending further investigation." The diplomatic language barely concealed the severity of what had occurred. Admiral Kalis had apparently been acting without authorization, perhaps even in direct contravention of Council directives. "Captain Arcturus, the Council requests that you serve as interim negotiator with the human representatives. Your handling of the situation thus far demonstrates the qualities needed for this delicate task. It was both an extraordinary honor and a potential trap. Success would cement her place in history. Failure could make her the scapegoat for any diplomatic breakdown. "I am at the service of the Empire. Speaker," she replied formally, while her mind raced with the implications. "Excellent. The negotiations will take place on neutral ground, Orion Station itself. Representatives from both Earth vessels will meet with Imperial diplomats under your supervision. The Council expects regular reports on progress." After the transmission ended, Celine sat in momentary silence, processing the dramatic reversal of her circumstances. From border station commander to chief negotiator in a matter of hours, it was unprecedented and slightly suspicious. She activated her communicator. "Ryan, meet me in my office immediately, and bring your most sophisticated scanning equipment, the kind not registered in official inventories." When the engineer arrived, his expression showed both confusion and concern. "Captain, sweep the office for monitoring devices," she instructed quietly. "Particularly quantum entanglement transmitters." Ryan complied without question, methodically moving his specialized scanner around the room. After several minutes, he stopped near her desk. There, he indicated a nearly microscopic device embedded in the structural material of the desk itself. "Quantum transmitter. Extremely sophisticated. It's been monitoring everything in this room based on the integration pattern, possibly years." Celine wasn't entirely surprised. The Empire's intelligence services were known to monitor key personnel, particularly those in sensitive positions. What was surprising was that the Council had apparently been receiving direct feeds from her station, without the knowledge of Admiral Kalis or his intelligence officers. "Can you disable it without detection?" she asked. Ryan considered the device. "Not permanently, but I can loop its transmission, send the same ambient data repeatedly to make it appear functional, while blocking actual monitoring." "Do it," she ordered. Once he had completed the task, Celine activated her secure communication channel to the Vanguard. "Captain Donovan, we need to talk. The situation has changed significantly." Within the hour, representatives from both human vessels had arrived at Orion Station. Captain Donovan came from the Vanguard, while Ambassador Mbeki led the delegation from the Concordia. Celine met them in a conference room that Ryan had personally swept for surveillance devices. Ambassador Mbeki was an imposing figure, tall and dignified, with the bearing of someone accustomed to navigating complex diplomatic waters. "Captain Arcturus," she greeted Celine warmly. "Your reputation precedes you. Your handling of this situation has been exemplary." "That remains to be seen, Ambassador," Celine replied cautiously. "The Council has appointed me as negotiator, but I suspect their motives may be complex." "Political bodies always have complex motives," Mbeki observed with a slight smile. "But the opportunity before us transcends individual agendas." Donovan joined the conversation. "The Admiral's fleet has withdrawn to the outer system, but remains within strike range. The situation is still volatile." Celine nodded in agreement. "The Council may have relieved Admiral Kalis of command, but his supporters remain influential within the fleet, and we still don't know who he was communicating with in the forbidden sectors." "About that," Mbeki said, activating a holographic display from a device on her wrist. "Earth intelligence has been monitoring the forbidden sectors for some time. We believe they contain experimental weapons facilities, developing technology based on artifacts from an ancient civilization." The display showed sensor readings of unusual energy signatures emanating from several locations, deep within the restricted space. The patterns were unlike anything in standard Imperial technology, more chaotic, almost organic in their fluctuations. "If true," Celine said carefully, "this would violate several Imperial edicts regarding the handling of precursor technology." "Precisely," Mbeki confirmed. "Which is why certain factions within your military might be operating without full Council authorization. They're pursuing weapons development that violates your own laws. The revelation aligned with rumors Celine had heard throughout her career. Whispers of secret projects and discovered artifacts that defied conventional understanding. But concrete evidence had always been lacking. "You're suggesting that Admiral Kalis was part of this faction?" she asked. "We believe so," Donovan confirmed. His reaction to our arrival was extreme, even by Imperial standards. "The Vanguard represents advanced technology. Yes, but nothing that fundamentally alters the balance of power. Unless you were already engaged in an arms race with a perceived superior power." Celine finished the thought. "And our presence threatened to expose that fact to the Council." The implications cascaded through her mind. If rogue elements within the Imperial military were developing forbidden weapons technology, it would explain the Admiral's desperate attempt to eliminate witnesses by attacking both the Vanguard and Orion Station simultaneously. "The question now," Mbeki said pragmatically, "is how we proceed with negotiations given these complications." Celine considered their position carefully. "The Council clearly wants a diplomatic resolution. They wouldn't have appointed me otherwise. But they may not be fully aware of the extent of this factional divide within the military. Or they're aware but can't acknowledge it publicly," Donovan suggested. "Admitting to forbidden weapons research would create internal instability and potentially invite intervention from other powers. Then we negotiate on two levels," Mbeki proposed. "Officially, we establish formal diplomatic relations between Earth and the Empire, with trade agreements and non-aggression pacts, the standard diplomatic package. Unofficially, we address the faction issue and the forbidden technology." Celine nodded slowly. "A dual-track approach could work, but it will require trust on both sides, something in limited supply at the moment." "Trust begins with transparency," Mbeki said firmly. "Earth is prepared to share information about our technological capabilities, within reason, in exchange for similar disclosure from the Empire." The days that followed were intense. Formal negotiations began with the arrival of the Imperial Diplomatic Corps, a group of seasoned negotiators whose elaborate ceremonial attire belied their sharp minds and careful calculations. The discussions took place in Orion Station's grand observation deck, with the vast expanse of space visible through transparent viewports that curved overhead. While the formal negotiations proceeded according to strict Imperial protocols, Celine conducted parallel discussions with Mbeki and Donovan, focusing on the more sensitive issues of factional divisions and forbidden technology. These meetings occurred in locations swept clean of surveillance by Ryan's increasingly sophisticated countermeasures. On the third day of negotiations, a significant breakthrough occurred during the formal session. The lead Imperial negotiator, a silver-haired diplomat named Veritax, made an unexpected concession. The Empire acknowledges Earth's status as a sovereign power, with territorial rights extending throughout its home system and designated colonial outposts, he announced, reading from an officially sealed document. "Furthermore, we propose the establishment of a joint research initiative focused on non-military applications of advanced technology." The specific mention of non-military applications was telling, an implicit acknowledgement of concerns about weapons development that had not been officially raised in the formal negotiations. Ambassador Mbeki responded with equal formality. Earth accepts this acknowledgement and reciprocates with recognition of the Stellara Empire's sovereignty within its established borders. We welcome the proposed research initiative and suggest Orion Station as its headquarters, given its strategic position between our territories. The designation of Orion Station as a joint research facility represented a diplomatic masterstroke. It would transform a military observation post into a symbol of cooperation while ensuring that both parties maintained oversight of the border region. As the formal session concluded for the day, Celine received an urgent message from Rian. "Captain, unusual energy signatures detected from the forbidden sectors. Similar to previous quantum communications, but significantly stronger." The timing was suspicious. As negotiations progressed toward agreement, the mysterious faction within the Imperial military appeared to be increasing its activities. Celine shared this information with Donovan and Mbeki during their private meeting that evening. "They're mobilizing," Donovan concluded grimly, "preparing to disrupt the treaty before it can be finalized." "We need to accelerate the timeline," Mbeki suggested. "Push for signature of the preliminary agreements tomorrow, rather than following the traditional 3-week protocol." Celine considered the implications. Breaking with protocol so dramatically will raise suspicions. The Imperial negotiators are traditionalists. They value the ceremonial aspects of diplomacy almost as much as the substance. "Then we need leverage," Donovan said. "Something that makes immediate action not just desirable but necessary." A moment of contemplative silence followed, before Celine spoke carefully. "What if we provide evidence of the forbidden research? Not publicly, but directly to the Council through secure channels." "You would expose internal Imperial secrets to resolve an external diplomatic situation?" Mbeki asked, studying Celine closely. "That's a significant step for an Imperial officer." "I serve the Empire," Celine replied firmly. "Not factions within it that violate our most sacred principles. The prohibition against certain precursor technologies exists for good reason. The historical records speak of civilizations destroyed by their misuse." The decision made. They moved quickly to implement their plan. Ryan provided detailed sensor readings of the quantum transmissions, while the Vanguard contributed long-range scans of the forbidden sectors that had been gathered during its stealthy approach to Imperial space. Mbeki compiled this information with intelligence from Earth sources, creating a comprehensive picture of the clandestine research program. Celine transmitted the dossier directly to the central speaker, using encryption codes that had been provided for her diplomatic communications. The response came within hours, a priority message ordering the immediate conclusion of negotiations and ratification of the treaty. The following morning, the formal negotiation session had a different atmosphere. The Imperial diplomats, clearly operating under new instructions, moved with unprecedented urgency through the remaining protocol items. By midday, the preliminary agreements were ready for signature. In the grand tradition of Imperial diplomacy, the signing ceremony was conducted with elaborate formality, despite the accelerated timeline. Representatives from both civilizations gathered in the observation deck, which had been transformed with ceremonial decorations that blended Imperial and Earth aesthetic traditions. Ambassador Mbeki signed first, her elegant signature capturing the historic nature of the moment. The lead Imperial negotiator followed, affixing both his signature and the Great Seal of the Empire to the document. As witnesses, both Celine and Donovan added their signatures to what would become known as the Orion Accords. The ceremony concluded with a symbolic gesture, the deactivation of weapon systems on both the Imperial vessels and the Earth ships. As the energy signatures of charged weapons faded from sensor readings, a palpable sense of relief spread through the gathering. Yet even as the celebration began, Celine's communicator vibrated with an urgent message from Rion. Multiple transdimensional signatures detected approaching from the forbidden sectors. Configuration unknown, but energy patterns consistent with precursor technology. Celine excused herself discreetly and made her way to the command center, where Ryan was monitoring the approaching vessels. 5 ships, he reported as she arrived. Unlike anything in Imperial records, their hull configuration appears to incorporate organic components integrated with mechanical systems. The sensor display showed vessels that defied conventional design principles, asymmetrical structures that seemed to pulse with internal energy, their surfaces shifting in patterns that suggested living tissue rather than manufactured materials. "Time to intercept?" Celine asked tensely. "At current velocity, approximately 30 minutes. She immediately opened communication channels to both Donovan and the Imperial Diplomatic Corps. "We have a situation developing that requires immediate attention." Within minutes, Representatives from all parties had gathered in the command center, watching with growing concern as the sensor data updated in real time. "These are not authorized Imperial vessels," the lead diplomat stated firmly. "Their energy signatures violate the Precursor Technology Prohibition Edict." "Then who's controlling them?" Donovan asked the question that hung in the air. The answer came in the form of a transmission that bypassed Orion Station's security protocols, projecting a holographic image directly into the command center. Admiral Kalis appeared, but changed, his uniform replaced by armor of unusual design, with components that seemed to shift and move independently. "Captain Arcturus." He greeted her with cold formality. "You've exceeded your authority for the last time. The treaty you facilitated threatens the true future of the Empire, a future where we claim our rightful place as inheritors of precursor power." Celine maintained her composure, despite the shock of his appearance. "Admiral, you appear to be in violation of multiple Imperial edicts. Stand down your vessels and surrender for Council judgment." Kalis laughed without humor. "The Council is obsolete, clinging to traditions and restrictions that have held our civilization back for centuries. What you're witnessing is the dawn of a new era. An era built on forbidden technology that destroyed its creators," Celine countered. "The prohibition exists for a reason, Admiral." "Superstition and fear," Kalis dismissed. "We've mastered what the precursors could not control. Their mistake was hesitation. We will not repeat it." As the conversation continued, Donovan quietly approached Mbeki. "The Vanguard and Concordia could intercept those vessels before they reach the station," he murmured. "But engaging would violate the disarmament clause we just signed." Mbeki considered this briefly before addressing the Imperial diplomat. "Given these extraordinary circumstances, Earth requests temporary suspension of the disarmament clause to address this threat to both our civilizations." The diplomat nodded gravely. "Granted under emergency protocols. The Empire formally requests Earth's assistance in neutralizing these rogue elements." With that authorization, Donovan immediately contacted his vessel. "Vanguard, battle stations. Coordinate with Concordia for intercept of hostile vessels approaching from the forbidden sectors." As the Earth vessels prepared for engagement, Kalis's holographic form smiled thinly. "Your primitive ships are no match for precursor technology, Captain Donovan. What you witnessed with the Vanguard's weapons was impressive by conventional standards, but meaningless against what we've developed. We'll take our chances, Admiral." Donovan replied firmly. "Humanity has faced extinction-level threats before. We're still here." The holographic transmission ended abruptly, and Celine turned to the assembled representatives. "We need to evacuate non-essential personnel from Orion Station immediately. If these vessels possess weapons based on precursor technology, conventional defenses may be insufficient." "The Imperial diplomatic vessel will assist with evacuation," the lead diplomat offered. "But, Captain Arcturus, the Empire requests that you maintain command of Orion Station during this crisis. Your knowledge of both the situation and the station's capabilities is invaluable." It was both an honor and potentially a death sentence, but Celine nodded her acceptance without hesitation. "I'll remain at my post." As evacuation procedures began, Celine worked with Ryan to reconfigure the station's defensive systems. If the Admiral's ships are using organic mechanical hybrid technology, they might be vulnerable to specific energy frequencies that disrupt the interface between biological and mechanical components. Ryan nodded, already making calculations. The station's primary communication array could be modified to emit a focused pulse at the correct frequency. It won't be a weapon in the conventional sense, but it might temporarily disable their systems. "Make it happen," Celine ordered. "And prepare emergency power rerouting protocols in case we need to channel everything into a single burst." Outside the station, the Earth vessels moved to intercept the approaching threat. The Vanguard and Concordia positioned themselves in a defensive formation that would force the rogue vessels to engage before reaching Orion Station. The first exchange of fire was brief, but devastating. The lead rogue vessel emitted a wave of energy, unlike anything in either human or Imperial records, a rippling distortion that seemed to bend the fabric of space itself. Where it passed, shield systems flickered and failed, leaving the Earth vessels momentarily vulnerable. The Vanguard responded with its plasma lance, striking the lead vessel directly. Under conventional circumstances, such a hit would have been catastrophic. Instead, the rogue vessel's hull seemed to absorb and redistribute the energy, the organic components pulsing with increased activity. Direct hit. No significant damage, reported the Vanguard's tactical officer. Their hull appears to adapt to our weapon's frequency in real time. Donovan reassessed their strategy immediately. Modulate plasma frequency randomly with each discharge. Don't give them a pattern to adapt to. The Concordia, meanwhile, deployed its own unique weapon system, a cloud of microscopic drones that surrounded the second rogue vessel, attaching to its hull and beginning to interfere with its organic mechanical interface. This approach showed more promise, as the affected vessel began to move erratically, its systems apparently struggling to maintain coherence under the microscopic assault. Observing this from Orion Station, Selene immediately incorporated the insight into their defensive preparations. Ryan, can we repurpose the station's maintenance nanites to function similarly to the Concordia's drones? Theoretically, yes, Ryan replied, already accessing the relevant systems. But they're not designed for external deployment. We'd need to modify their programming and protective casings to survive in open space. Make it your priority, Selene directed. If we can disrupt the organic components of their technology, we might have a chance. The battle outside intensified as the remaining rogue vessels joined the engagement. Their weapons, distortion beams that warped both space and the energy shields trying to occupy that space, presented a challenge unlike anything the Earth vessels had encountered. Yet the humans demonstrated remarkable adaptability, constantly adjusting their tactics and defensive configurations to minimize damage. Inside Orion Station, Selene received a priority communication from the Imperial capital. The central speaker appeared, his expression grave. Captain Arcturus, the Council has reviewed the situation. Admiral Kalis's actions represent high treason against the Empire. You are hereby granted emergency authority to use any means necessary to neutralize this threat. The formal language barely concealed the desperation behind it. The Council, faced with a faction that had secretly developed prohibited technology, was essentially giving Selene carte blanche to resolve the situation by any means available. Understood, Speaker, she acknowledged. Be advised that we are implementing unconventional countermeasures that may have wider implications for Imperial technology policy. The Council places its trust in your judgment, Captain, the Speaker replied simply, before ending the transmission. Selene turned to Rian, who had been working frantically on the nanite reprogramming. Status? Ready for deployment, he reported. I've modified approximately 60% of our maintenance nanites for external operation. They're programmed to target the organic mechanical interface points on the rogue vessels. Deploy immediately, Selene ordered, and prepare the modified communication array for pulse emission on my command. Outside, the battle had reached a critical phase. 2 of the 5 rogue vessels showed signs of significant damage from the combined efforts of the Earthships. But the flagship, presumably carrying Admiral Kalis himself, remained largely intact and was advancing steadily toward Orion Station. Nanites deployed, Ryan confirmed, as the tiny machines were released into space, propelled toward the approaching vessels by precision microthrusters. On the main view screen, Selene watched as the cloud of nanites intercepted the lead rogue vessel. At first, there was no visible effect. Then, gradually, portions of the organic hull began to discolor and lose coherence. the seamless integration between biological and mechanical components beginning to fail. The rogue vessel's advance slowed, then halted, as its systems struggled against the microscopic invaders. Taking advantage of this vulnerability, the Vanguard targeted its plasma lance at the now exposed mechanical core of the vessel, bypassing the adaptive organic hull. The resulting explosion was contained but decisive. The rogue flagship lost propulsion and weapons capability, drifting helplessly in space. "Communication array ready for pulse emission," Ryan reported. "But, Captain, at this range, the pulse will affect all vessels with organic mechanical interfaces, including the damaged rogue ships." Celine nodded grimly. "The Council granted emergency authorization. Emit the pulse." The modified array activated, sending an invisible wave of precisely modulated energy outward from the station. As it passed through the rogue vessels, their remaining systems failed catastrophically. The organic components withered and separated from their mechanical counterparts, leaving the ships as little more than drifting hulks. In the sudden silence following the pulse, Celine opened a communication channel to all vessels. "This is Captain Celine Arcturus of Orion Station. The immediate threat has been neutralized. All vessels are ordered to stand down weapon systems and prepare to render assistance to any survivors." The response came first from the Vanguard. "Captain Donovan acknowledging. We're standing down weapons and preparing rescue operations." The Imperial diplomatic vessel followed suit, confirming compliance with Celine's orders despite her relatively junior rank, a testament to the emergency authority granted by the Council. Search and rescue operations commenced immediately, with teams from both Earth and Imperial vessels working to locate and retrieve survivors from the disabled rogue ships. Admiral Kalis was found alive but unconscious, his body showing disturbing signs of integration with precursor technology, organic implants that had penetrated his nervous system and begun rewriting his biological functions. "He's become a hybrid himself," the Imperial medical officer reported to Celine as the Admiral was transferred to a secure medical facility on the diplomatic vessel. "The technology appears to have affected his neurological functions, possibly influencing his decision-making and emotional responses." This discovery added a disturbing dimension to the Admiral's betrayal. Had he been fully responsible for his actions, or had the precursor technology gradually altered his mind as he worked with it? The question would be central to both his eventual trial and to Imperial policy regarding precursor artifacts. In the days that followed, as Orion Station was repaired and the immediate crisis contained, the implications of what had occurred began to reshape interstellar relations. The Orion Accords, signed just before the attack, provided the framework for unprecedented cooperation between Earth and the Empire. With the Council's blessing, Orion Station was formally redesignated as the Intergalactic Trade and Research Hub, a neutral zone where scientists and diplomats from both civilizations could work together. The station's strategic position at the border between galaxies made it ideal for this new role. Celine, recognized for her pivotal role in both the diplomatic breakthrough and the defense against the rogue faction, was offered command of the transformed facility. The position came with promotion to Admiral, a rare honor for an officer of her relatively young age. The hub requires leadership that understands both military security and diplomatic nuance, the central speaker explained during the formal commissioning ceremony. "Your actions have demonstrated mastery of both." Captain Donovan, whose Vanguard had initiated the crisis but ultimately helped resolve it, was appointed as Earth's military liaison to the hub. The vessel that had once approached in stealth now docked openly at the newly expanded facilities, a symbol of the changed relationship between the powers. Ambassador Mbeki, meanwhile, established permanent diplomatic offices at the hub, working closely with Imperial representatives to expand the initial treaty into a comprehensive framework for cultural, scientific, and economic exchange. Perhaps most significantly, the incident led to a fundamental reconsideration of Imperial policy regarding precursor technology. The dangers of unregulated research had been dramatically demonstrated, but so had the potential benefits when approached with proper caution and oversight. Under the new protocols jointly developed by Earth and Imperial scientists, research into certain precursor technologies would be permitted, but only under stringent controls and with complete transparency between the civilizations. The organic-mechanical interface that had powered the rogue vessels became the subject of careful study, with applications focused on medical and environmental restoration rather than weapons development. 5 years after the signing of the Orion Accords, the Intergalactic Trade and Research Hub had grown beyond recognition. Where once a solitary observation station had monitored for potential threats, now a sprawling complex of laboratories, diplomatic missions, and commercial exchanges flourished. Admiral Celine Arcturus stood in her office, gazing out at the spectacular view of ships from dozens of civilizations, moving through the carefully choreographed traffic patterns around the hub. Earth vessels with their distinctive angular designs contrasted with the flowing organic lines of Imperial ships, while representatives from newly contacted species brought their own unique aesthetics to the growing community. A chime announced the arrival of visitors: Captain Donovan, now Admiral Donovan following his own promotion, and Ambassador Mbeki, whose diplomatic acumen had been recognized with appointment to Earth's highest diplomatic council. "Quite a view," Donovan remarked, joining Celine at the viewport. "Hard to believe this all started with us sneaking up on your doorstep." Celine smiled slightly. "A provocative approach to first contact, I must say, though effective in its way. The most important diplomatic breakthroughs often begin with moments of crisis," Mbeki observed philosophically. "What matters is how we respond to those moments." The three stood in companionable silence, watching as a massive transport vessel, bearing the insignia of both Earth and the Empire, departed the hub, bound for newly established joint colonies in previously unexplored sectors. The ship, named Concord, represented the culmination of 5 years of scientific and engineering collaboration. "The Council is proposing expansion of the Accords to include the Proxima Coalition," Celine informed her companions. "Preliminary discussions begin next month." "Ambitious," Donovan commented. "The Coalition has historically been skeptical of both human and Imperial intentions, which is precisely why we need to engage them," Mbeki countered. "The principles established here, transparency, mutual security, shared advancement, have proven their value. They deserve wider application." As they discussed the future of interstellar diplomacy, Celine reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. A phantom signal on a sensor grid had cascaded into confrontation, revelation, and ultimately transformation. The galaxy they inhabited now was fundamentally different from the one that had existed before the Vanguard's daring approach to Orion Station. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "in the historical archives of the precursor civilizations, there's a recurring theme about moments of convergence, points where the actions of a few individuals reshape the trajectory of entire species. And you believe we experienced such a moment?" Mbeki asked. Celine nodded toward the viewport, where the traffic of countless vessels represented countless lives, now proceeding on paths that would have been unimaginable a decade earlier. "I believe we're still experiencing it," she replied. "The convergence isn't a single event, it's an ongoing process. What matters is that we continue to guide it toward greater understanding rather than conflict." As if to underscore her point, a notification appeared on her display, another phantom reading at the edge of explored space, but this time from an unknown source beyond both human and Imperial territories. "It seems the universe has more introductions in store for us," Donovan observed, noting the alert. Celine smiled with genuine anticipation. "Then let's make sure we're ready to greet them properly." Together, the three architects of the new order prepared to face whatever challenges and opportunities waited beyond the next frontier. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and dangers in equal measure. But for the first time in countless generations, Civilization approached that vastness not as isolated competitors, but as cautious collaborators in a shared journey of discovery. And it had all begun with a phantom signal and a human battleship that got too close.